Welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, and today I'll be talking about the Page of Wands. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. The best way to support the podcast right now is to listen daily, rate, review, and to follow or subscribe in your chosen podcast app. If you're loving the podcast and want to further support me, you can join my Patreon for behind-the-scenes access to upcoming topics, polls, monthly hangouts, tarot questions, and more. If you're local to the greater Puget Sound area, I'd love to see you at my next Let's Talk Tarot meetup group event. If you'd like to be the first to hear about upcoming events, presentations, musings, and info and photos of my day-to-day life, you can go ahead and sign up for my weekly newsletter. You'll also get my free PDF with the 2025 5-card tarot spread I created just for you at the beginning of the year when you sign up. If you don't already know, I'm a sex and relationships therapist seeing clients virtually all over Washington State. I love working with queer, kinky, poly, and witchy clients who might be struggling with anxiety, chronic pain or illness, communication issues, self-advocacy, and sex. Book a free 20-minute consultation now to make sure we're a good fit to work together. You can find the links for any of these offers in the show notes or on my website, CamilleASaunders.com/everydaytarot, in addition to the images of the cards I pull on each episode. All right, so we are into season 6. We're getting close to the end here of the season as we're talking about the Suit of Wands, going through each card one per episode. If you haven't listened to my other seasons yet, you can go ahead and check those out. The first season, I talked about tarot basics. In seasons 2 and 3, I went through the major arcana and the 4 suits, one per episode. In season 4, I talked all about tarot in pop culture and examined representations of tarot in video games, TV shows, movies, and more. And in season 5, I went through 13 common tarot spreads. Like I said, now we're in season 6, where I'm talking all about the Suit of Wands. If you want to hear an episode dedicated to an overview of the whole Suit of Wands, you can check out season 3, episode 10. And today I'm talking about the Page of Wands. So images or symbols associated with this card are fire, flames, anything representing passion, youthfulness, or childlike enthusiasm. I'm looking at 3 Page of Wands images from 3 of my decks that I have. So in the Anima Mundi Tarot deck by Megan Weirer-Wenden, the Page of Wands is represented by a salamander. I believe historically salamanders were seen as sort of like an alchemical flame association. So that's going to be my sort of assumption as to why there's a salamander on this card. In the Sasarabito Tarot deck by Stasia Burrington, the Page of Wands cards is depicted by like a young girl, it looks like, holding a wand or what sort of looks like a tree branch. She actually has like fiery red hair, and then also she has like a image of flame or like a symbol of flames or fire like on her chest. And the back of the card is very like golden yellow as well. So we're getting this again, like the youthful, some enthusiasm, some of that flame or fire. And then in the Goddess of Love Tarot deck by Gabriela Herstick and illustrated by Julia Popescu, this card has a statue of a woman in the middle, sort of like lovingly embracing herself. We see like roses and also fire sort of on top of those roses. It's a collage style card, or like art. And so we see these sort of like, almost like she's wearing a sash of like roses, and then they're covered with flames. And then there's also, she's sort of standing on top of a very large rose. And then we have this sort of like snake in the background. I am going to look in the Goddess of Love Tarot deck guidebook talking about this card because I'm curious about that snake. Let's see. And in this one, she renames the Page of Wands to the Maiden of Wands. In this deck, she sort of renames all of the sort of stereotypically male or masculine named cards to be like feminine or femme presenting or women names. So the page becomes the maiden. It says, remember your first sexual awakening when you discovered the pleasures that sexuality could bring. This is the erotic potential of the Maiden of Wands, bursting with curiosity and potential. Show up curious about your desires, what turns you on, and what brings you pleasure. The Maiden of Wands is a totem in the sacred temple of the goddess of love. She asks you to step into the role as sovereign, but without the worry of what will happen. Instead, she queries, what if? What if you could get everything you wanted? What if? This card can also represent a partner, mentor, ancestor, lover, or spirit guide who acts as a beacon. So the affirmation associated with this card is I claim sensuous joy, wonder, and pleasure, and I follow it down the path of the goddess and love. And then the journal question associated with this card in this deck is how can adding a sense of trust, joy, and what if to my relationship with love, sex, and intimacy allow me to trust in the abundance the goddess is sharing with me? So perhaps the snake is sort of about this like sexual awakening. Snakes are often, when they're depicted as like a symbol, are about transformation or sort of like if you think of the Ouroboros, which is a snake like in a circle that's depicted as like eating its own tail. It's sort of this like cyclical, right? Things keep on moving, keep turning, and also snakes are about transformation generally in sort of like a symbolic way when depicted. And so maybe this is also about that sort of sexual transformation or like coming into your sexuality as well. I did want to also look up the salamander. So on the page of wands in the Anima Mundi deck, it says it's a spotted salamander. It says the page of wands, like the fool, has a fresh yet passionate outlook on life. Drawing this card indicates that you have a creative spark in you, so go ahead. Be spontaneous and follow your creative muse. It says upright. This card is all about exploration, enthusiasm, discovery, and creativity. So again, lots of that, like the spark or sort of like the spark of ideas, right? With this, even the language we use around fire or creativity or passion, which is sort of in general what the wand suit is about, also is like how we speak about, again, like sort of fire. We have all these sort of fire metaphors. All right, so let's get into some specific card correspondence with this. So in the Library of Esoterica tarot book by Taschen, it states about this card that it's all about passion and overcoming obstacles. It's lighthearted, exuberant, and the Page of Wands offers new insights and ideas and points the way onto a new path or creative direction. So in my tarot and astrology book by Corinne Kenner, she talks about that the Page of Wands is the personification of fire. She embodies the burning drives and desires of all three fire signs, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, along with their enthusiasm for spiritual development and understanding. The Page of Wands is holy and pure. She serves as a vessel of spiritual creation. Like Vesta, the goddess of hearth and home, generations of spiritual women can trace her lineage to her and through her. She connects the suit of wands to the world of spirit and creativity, and she's the keeper of the flame we first saw in the Ace of Wands. During the Renaissance, pages were the youngest members of the royal court. They would frequently serve as messengers. It was their job to carry news from one person to another. In addition, because they were young, pages were students learning their future roles through apprenticeship. Like her fellow pupils, the Page of Wands is youthful with childlike enthusiasm and an unbounded capacity to learn. She burns with a passion for discovery. She's also impetuous. She can lie low, glowing like an ember for hours, but once you spark her imagination, she'll burst into flame. Add fuel to the fire, and she'll erupt into a conflagration that's hard to contain and almost impossible to extinguish. All right. So in the Fearless Tarot book by Elliot Adam, It talks about that the Page of Wands is all about aspiration, um, that it's often depicted as a richly dressed person ready for his adventure in Egypt. He was inspired by his older brother, the Knight of Wands, to overcome his insecurities and bravely explore the world. He wears a vibrant yellow tunic, the most optimistic color. The Page of Wands wears the same red plume in his cap as the Fool, linking him with optimism, unlimited potential, and new beginnings. I'm sort of looking at my other um, cards here because I don't really have any decks that have traditional depictions of the cards. Some of my books have the Rider-Waite-Smith sort of more traditional view art of the cards. So in this one, again, like the Page of Wands, he is like holding a staff that's like way taller than him. And it's almost like he looks a little like out of his league. It says, the staff is from his father, the King of Wands, and he hasn't quite grown into it yet. His height in relation to the staff symbolizes that he is in the state of growing. The wand the page holds also reminds him of his role models, the Knight, Queen, and King of Wands. He is mesmerized by the Knight's courage for adventure, the Queen's charisma, and the King's wisdom. He doesn't feel bad about himself by comparing their talents to his own. This is because he recognizes the force behind their talents is also found within himself. The very fact that you admire certain qualities in others is because you have those qualities in common. Much like the page, you may still be finding out how to make these qualities your own. Don't try to compare yourself to the abilities, talents, and achievements of others. Instead, look at the force behind those talents and you will see that you are strengthening those same attributes within yourself. Yeah, and I really like that idea of sort of like when we maybe fall into this trap of comparing, maybe sometimes it is because we're really working on those aspects of ourselves or like learning, or right, we're feeling that like, oh, I aspire to be like them. And instead of like slating that as like jealousy or saying like, oh, like I'm just not good as them or this or that, it's sort of like a clue to us of like, oh, okay, like interesting. Good to know. And also like, yeah, I think that is a thing that I sort of that inspires me, that is a value of mine that I want to work towards. And it doesn't have to look like other people's or things like that, but that also there's this aspect of like, I'm learning, right? I'm a page, I'm learning, right? I think now a lot of the times the only thing that I have heard the use of page is when like people are in like government. I think they have pages like congressional representatives sometimes have pages, and it's sort of like you're interning for them. But that's like the only thing I feel like is where we use page now in our sort of, at least in my experience, in our more modern time. But yeah, so it's interesting to think about, right, what are the aspects of your life where you feel like you're new to it, where you're learning, and where it doesn't really do you much good to um, compare yourself to others, right? Like we can be exciting and passionate and dynamic and realizing our full potential and starting to work towards these things. Like we can feel like, oh, I want to be talented and have this sort of like expertise in this area. It can also be about like art or other like performance type of things. But also it's about this like courage and aspiration towards like more. Like I want this thing that I maybe don't feel like I have right now, and I want to work on it even more. Um, the author in this book talks about Judy Garland and like seeing them as a courageous like example and someone that they admired or aspired to be like. Since she was very criticized by like the media or just very well known. And for me, I think about when I first started being really into gardening and sort of like homesteading or having a small farm or animals and living this more like seasonal life, being connected with nature. I watched a lot of YouTube. I still watch some. And I found a lot of people that I really admire and aspire to be like on there, who were documenting oftentimes like their day to day or even week to week of what it looked like on their farm, or things that they were doing, or ways to, even if you're on a small plot of land or no land, when I was living in a townhouse or an apartment, um, still being able to connect with plants and learn things and identify them, and create some of your own goods and work with making sourdough bread, or DIYing, or crafting in different things. And someone that I really like admire is Jessica Salads on Roots and Refuge. Her channel is Roots and Refuge on YouTube. And she was living on, I think, 6 acres at the time, in like a house that they had put a lot of work into, an effort that had been a foreclosure, I know, so they did a lot of work on that to sort of have this property. And she was, gardening in that space. They had a lot of goats and chickens. And she just was really sharing like her life and how this was helping her, um, her experience with chronic illness, and how that sort of led her to some of this life, her own kids' allergies and stuff like that, or things that they dealt with when they were young. Um, and yeah, it was just very inspiring to me and really made me feel like, oh, okay, like I can watch these people and plan for when I have a yard or when I have more space. And so when I eventually did buy a house in 2020 and got to move onto a place that actually had a yard of any meaningful size. Previously, I lived in a townhouse where we had a very small backyard that was, or like back patio basically, that was fully shaded, so it was very hard to grow things there. When I moved to this house I'm currently in, that's on like just shy of a quarter acre, which felt huge at the time after moving from something that was just basically like mostly concrete, and fully shaded, I felt sort of like prepared to build my own raised beds with help from my boyfriend, and get chickens and have a chicken coop and start gardening and get a greenhouse and start my own seeds and all this sort of different stuff. And so that was sort of my own personal example of thinking about my like creativity was sparked. I was aspiring to be like, okay, be more connected to nature and be spending time growing my own food and stuff like that. And that was like such a way to see someone that was doing things that I thought were super cool and that I could maybe model after, or just felt very inspired by. All right, and then lastly, in the Tarot for Change book by Jessica Dorr, she talks about that the Page of Wands, like we talked about earlier, represents the energy of youth and the spark of life before it is obscured. When someone says childlike enthusiasm, I think this is the energy they're talking about. Children have an innate ability to discern exactly what they like and don't like. If a food tastes, looks, or smells weird, they refuse it. If a piece of clothing is uncomfortable, they reject it wholeheartedly. Nothing is more ludicrous to a child than wearing something scratchy or stiff. For what? To look like some sort of cherub for the neighbors? Please. A kid wants to do whatever job sounds the coolest and most interesting. Astronaut, paleontologist, teacher. They're not concerning themselves with salaries, benefits, or PTO. When asked what they want to eat for dinner, they're not thinking about sodium levels or calories. They're thinking about what's going to feel good and taste good, what's going to fulfill a desire in the moment. I can't tell you how many adults that I've worked with who couldn't identify a true desire if they tried. To be tapped into these energies, to be available for what truly excites and vivifies and moves us. And I think that that is sort of what this card is all about. All of the pages in tarot, the Page of Wands, the Page of Cups, the Page of Pentacles, and the Page of Swords, symbolize youth, innocence, and wonder. Just as the child has endless questions about the world, the Page of Wands wants us to ask ourselves, what do I love? What captivates my attention? What grips me, lights me up, claims me? The Page of Wands is an invitation to reconnect with something raw and original within us, something many of us relinquish as we cross the threshold into adulthood. I like to think about the Page of Wands as the keeper of a little spark that lives inside each of us. And though the spark sometimes gets obscured or covered over by judgments, core beliefs, and social pressures, the Page of Wands bears the spark as long as we are alive. Perhaps tucked inside the things we are brave enough to love with reckless abandon, there's a specific calling and purpose that even as we can, and very often do, veer woefully out of alignment with, is never far from reach. And so this is sort of a card that calls us, right, to maybe re-engaging with that spark, right, re-engaging with our childlike wonder. I know for me, like going outside and being in nature is like a great way to do that. It sort of forces me to slow down, to notice a lot of things, like little critters and flowers and stuff around that are in my yard, especially right now as it is springtime where I am in the Pacific Northwest, in the Northern Hemisphere. And it's just, yeah, it really captivates me in a very different way than sometimes living my day-to-day life inside with computers and working with people virtually and gotta get things done and it's tax season and la la la. Like we can really get caught up in those things. And so this card is all about re-engaging with that creativity, our wonder, our courageous parts of self, our parts of self that like to ask questions and to know and understand or try out new things, and that, right, are courageous and brave. All right, let's dive in and see what the cards have to say on this topic. Okay, so I'm going to pull a card from the Desert Illuminations Tarot deck by Lindsay D. Williams. I'm going to do a couple quick shuffles as I think about, right, how can we find that spark within us? What sort of things are exciting our creativity? How can we be courageous and brave? And that what if, like, what if it all goes well, right? What if I get everything I want? What would those things be? I think a lot of times as adults, we're sort of fearful of indulging the even question of what it would be like if we got everything we wanted, if we didn't have to, make sacrifices or sort of settle for different things. But if we truly got to imagine about everything that we wanted, whatever it was, what would it be? Like, what's the dream? How can we what's the creative spark within us, right? The idea for a business or for buying land with other people and building a commune or what else? Traveling all over, taking like 6 months off of work and traveling all over the world, right? Like there's lots of different dreams that adults have, but then we often are sort of like, oh, I'll do that later, or oh, I can't do that till I retire, or oh, no, I should be saving money right now. And like, yes, we can be responsible in our financial decision making, but also it can be very fun to like have, a goal or something to work towards, because that can make everything else feel sort of worth it when we have, right, when we start to indulge what we actually want and that creative desire within us. All right, one more shuffle and then I'll pull a card. Okay, this one wants to come out. All right, it is the Five of Jugs, and I pulled this the other day. I think literally last episode. I'll have to check on that. But that's kind of funny. So the jugs are like cups in this deck. And what's depicted on the card is like a person with like a mask over their face. They have 5 jugs, 3 of which are falling over and things are spilling out. And 5s are generally sort of like a challenging card or a conflict or feeling stuck. So says, a masked bandit in a long black cape stands under the night sky in the middle of a painted desert. He's surrounded by a bunch of whiskey jugs, tipped over and spilling their contents onto the sand. This is an ominous scene that is surreal and mysterious. The Five of Jugs is symbolic of lost opportunities and disappointments. In life, sometimes plans fall through or situations don't turn out exactly as you expect. Instead of dwelling on the lost moments, consider how you could learn from these experiences. You may run the risk of getting stuck in the past. Remember to stay present and focused from moment to moment, one day at a time. It's very easy to get anxious or stressed out from ruminating on what happened. Practice forgiveness and patience with yourself is the key to getting unstuck. All right, well, that felt fairly self-explanatory. So I'm going to stop there for today. So links for the tarot decks will always be in the show notes and on my website if you'd like to look at them or purchase them. And thanks for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Just as a reminder, the podcast comes out daily, Monday through Friday for all 2025. All right, see you soon. Bye-bye.